presentation today with a video from Buzz Aldrin.
We choose to go to the moon because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept and one we intend to win.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Engine running.
What a wonderful reception. I wish I could bring this wonderful crowd everywhere I go. That is one thing. You see these pieces of glass up here? They usually have words. I didn't memorize everything. But would you put some words up there for me, please? I have been having some wonderful days recently because with some of my searching out, I've gotten some information that has fortified my, keep working on it, my original thinking about cycling pathways to occupy Mars. And I changed my thinking from looking for a better way to get back to the moon back in the 80s. And there really isn't much of a better way than we did in Apollo with the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. But I was looking for pathways between Earth and the moon that would repeat and would allow an adventure traveler to get on the spacecraft and fly by the backside, or fly way out past the moon and look back at the Earth and the moon, or go by the front side. And this was not to put somebody on the surface of the moon, because we knew how to do that. But NASA wanted to put somebody on the moon, so my little idea of cycling orbits, that wasn't of much interest. So the administrator of NASA, Dr. Thomas Paine, when we went to the moon, right after having breakfast in the crew quarters, before we rode out to the launch pad in a government van out to where a government rocket would launch us with government quarters on the spacecraft, with government meals, to a government objective. And then we came back and landed with a government authorized parachute. And they picked us up in a government helicopter, took us to an aircraft carrier, and Pearl Harbor. Then we got on a flatbed, because we were in the trailer for quarantine. And so going from Pearl Harbor to Hickam Field in Hawaii, we were up high because we're on the flatbed, but this very distinguished looking gentleman with a white uniform on, and I think he had a white hat, he came by and looked up at us and said, "You lucky bastards." Now that was Admiral McCain, the commander of the Pacific Forces. We got right here, but I got to finish. So I came back and eventually back home after a government airplane. And so I filed a travel voucher. You know what that is? That's leaving home, going somewhere, and coming back, and listing all the expenses that you had. Because you don't get reimbursed for government. No, it's fine, if you get it to the beginning. So I filed a travel voucher, one of my favorite souvenirs. For all of that travel for 8 days, 9 days, the government paid me $33.31. reimbursed me for the rental car I had to drive from the air base in Florida to the crew quarters. Now, I didn't expect anything more, but I just thought you people would like to know what the government retirement is. Now, I do get my Air Force retirement. Now, another service that I know of that rides this way most of the time, they've arranged a special way to get paid for military service retirement and retirement from civil service. A number of us, Senator, call that double dipping. You're not supposed to do that. But ever since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Navy has been the favored good. And that's hard for me to take, being a West Pointer and an Air Force guy. It's been a while since I've been here to Salt Lake, although I used to like to ski close by. Park City, and other. See, I didn't put on skis till I was 50 years old. And that was just yesterday. I've been too busy the last few years to ski. But when somebody asked me to come here for Comic-Con, I forgot what my skis are, but I just really had to come back here and see some of my old friends. My dancing partner with Dancing with the Stars. Now, timing has been very important in my life. And is very important in your life. But I was blessed with having been in the right place at the right time. My education, I had a strong work ethic, a great family background, a sense of adventure. All of these were equally important. And they gave me great opportunities. I'm very proud to have served my country in the U.S. Air Force and the Apollo program. When people work together, sometimes you can accomplish the impossible. Apollo could never have happened without the cooperation and the efforts of many people working together toward a shared goal. Now consider this. Mankind, for ages, centuries, has dreamed about reaching space, other planets, even the stars. Well, it wasn't until the 20th century that man took to the air. In 1903, the Wright brothers took their first flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. I see the right slide here, but there we go. Now, I've been told that there's a little argument between Ohio and North Carolina. And it goes like this. North Carolina, well, you had the wind, but we in Ohio, we had the brains. Now you need both. Now, my mother was born the same year, 1903. And I guess you could say that pioneering maybe was my destiny. You see, her maiden name was Marion Moon. met in the Philippines, where my father was an aide to Billy Mitchell. Well, while I'm at it, my father's physics professor was Robert Goddard. Now, 1903, Neil and I reached the moon 66 years later, fulfilling the dreams of centuries of mankind. Now, I'll share a little bit of the story of how we got there and how when we work together, the world can achieve the next impossible dream. I took my first flight at age 2 with my father, Edwin Eugene Aldrin. He was an engineer and an aviation pioneer. He knew Charles Lindbergh, Orville Wright, and Jimmy Doodle quite well. This picture is, the picture we're looking at is Lockheed Vega, painted very proudly to look like an eagle, the symbol of our country, and the name of the spacecraft that we landed on the moon. Now, there is my father in the back seat, and I'm in the front seat. This is the day that I received my wings in Texas. But you don't think they were going to let me fly this famous aviation pioneer just because I got my Air Force wings. This is what's called a photo opportunity. Surrounded by the influences of aviation, I entered the Air Force after graduating from the military Academy at West Point. And this is a picture of me in that aircraft, and over a picture of my father in front of the same kind of airplane that I had my first ride in. So he was a manager of aviation fuel for Standard Oil of New Jersey. And they had their offices in New York at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. So when somebody called me up and said, "Do you want to play a part on 30 Rock?" Of course. And as long as I got to have an interesting interlude looking at the moon with Tina Fey, somehow that was better than Alec Baldwin. Now, let's get back to reality. My father was the manager of Newark Airport as a lieutenant colonel in the reserve in November 1941. And of course, we all know 7th of December 1941. I was listening with the family on that Sunday evening to the radio broadcast. And we're going to come up with, I think, the 75th anniversary of that day of infamy, as FDR called it, this coming December. But my father later became a consultant with NASA for the safety director for manned spaceflight. Now, after training in the Korean War, or after my pilot training, I was in the Korean War, and that finger means Marines, that was me, number one. And I flew 66 combat missions. The second one was a little bit more challenging. It was a little bit north of that river we weren't supposed to fly. Oh well, that's a long time ago. Hot pursuit, I think, was the escape clause. So anyway, having combat experiences on a resume is pretty good. Now, following the Korean War, I was stationed in Germany. So this was after I was at the Air Force Academy for 2 years. And I just found out last night that a graduate of the first class that came in while I was there in Denver when the Air Force Academy first opened up, General Oakes, later became 4-star, I guess, a commander of NATO and a great service to our country. But following the Air Force Academy, I got a good assignment flying F-100s. That was a Super Sabre, the hottest airplane we had, and at the best international base in Germany, Bitburg. Now, General Oakes said that he was the one that, after great consideration, closed down the base at Bitburg. Not just because the runway couldn't be extended. Anyway, at that time, in 1957, we switched from patrolling the border to alert. Alert, 5-minute, with nuclear weapons attached to the airplane. And I say that because back in those days, there were heavy bombers flying around with nuclear weapons. And it was a frightening time and a demanding time. Now, in October of 1957, the Soviet Union pulled off a sudden and unexpected technological feat. They launched Sputnik. A year later, we launched, a year later, America formed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, upgraded NAC. And the goal was to reach space. So the space age was born and the race was about to begin. Not really a race, but we were advancing our technology. We needed to. It turned out to be a race. So NASA in 1961 launched America's first Mercury astronaut, Alan Shepard, on a 15-minute suborbital flight, touching the edge of space. Now, the Russians had already made an incredible achievement by sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, on one full orbit of the Earth. Now, I think it was 8 days later, something like that, President Kennedy, he had asked NASA, what could we do that was possible? And this last year, at the 100th anniversary of MIT Aero-Astro Department, one of the old-timers there said that when Kennedy went to NASA, he said, I think we should go to Mars. Well, the engineer expect that. But they said, well, Mr. President, that's quite a challenge, but we'll look into it and let you know right away. So for one weekend, the guys worked up the various charts to convince the president that Mars was out of the picture. Maybe we could get to the moon in 15 years. Now, I got ahead of myself on the scoreboard here. So, he, after hearing this results of this very busy weekend, now, instead of accepting what was possible, on May 25th, 1961, 3 weeks after Alan Shepard's flight, President Kennedy boldly challenged America to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Decade, that's 10 years. And bring him back safely. Now that was a good idea. We had not even put anyone in orbit. The rockets and spacecraft needed to go beyond Earth orbit, just didn't exist. Many thought the challenge was impossible. We just didn't have the know-how. But we did have a leader with the vision, the determination, the courage, and the confidence that we could get there by publicly stating a goal and putting a specific time period on a very specific achievement. President Kennedy gave us no backing out. If space was going to be our next frontier, I wanted to be a part of it. So, after completing my tour of duty in Germany, I continued my education, getting a doctorate degree from MIT, and for my thesis, my experience of a fighter pilot intercepting enemy aircraft with an ideal trajectory sort of inspired me to devise a technique to do that between spacecraft, where one could intercept the other in this perfect intercept called manned orbital rendezvous. Little did anybody know at the time, including me, how critical this work would later become. Because about a year later, we did make the decision that to get to the moon and come back, we would use Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. That's the second time that has happened. The other time was when I was in a congressional hearing with the Space Subcommittee headed by Ted Cruz. All right, let's go back. The first time I applied to be an astronaut at NASA, I was turned down because I had not chosen to go through test pilot training. I really didn't want the rest of my Air Force career to be a real, just a precise pilot. I knew we had excellent people like that, and I probably wasn't among the real top, but I felt I had other things to try and do. So I applied again, and this time my jet fighter experience, plus my NASA's interest in my space rendezvous, influenced them to accept me in the third group of astronauts, where I became known as Dr. Rendezvous. Now, I'm not sure that this was always meant as a complimentary phrase from some of these hotshot Navy carrier night landing guys. Now, Mercury was the first stage of our space program, and it was followed by the two-man Gemini program. And that was used to fill the gap between one person and Mercury and the much more complicated Apollo program. So we were developing, and we needed that in-between program. And it was a very integral part of our training as we learned how to do spacewalking, which is really floating. And I had been a very avid scuba diver, so I welcomed the suggestion that we train underwater, neutral buoyancy, to simulate the weightlessness. And you can see in the picture, if you have any doubt, the bubbles are going up to the top of the swimming pool. And in my first space flight as pilot of Gemini 12, this was the last flight before we started moving toward Apollo. And I was able to set a 5.5-hour world record space flight, 3 different exits, while circling the globe every 90 minutes at a speed of 17,000 miles an hour. Now, what a sight to behold. Outside the capsule, looking around, it was a night photography with a camera to take pictures of stars in ultraviolet light. But during the day side, we didn't have that much scheduled, so besides being a sightseer, I used the camera to take the world's first selfie. So we had to set some of these hotshot space station guys, we had to set the record right, just who invented that thing. Now, back earlier, the timing of crew rotation was just right for Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins in the center, and me to be chosen for the first crew for that historic mission. It ended up being given the first chance to land. Now, originally it wasn't going to work out that way, but an engineer reduced the weight on the lunar module that we were going to fly, which was originally too heavy. So the next flight would have been the first one to land successfully with Pete Conrad on Apollo 12. So you never know when people who've turned out to be your great friends did something that changed fate for you. Now, the three of us estimated that we had about a 60% chance of being able to get to the moon, get in the lunar module, and land safely. Because there are many times when things could go wrong and you'd have to abort and come back. But we really did believe, land or not, that we had 95% chance of coming back safely. And those were good enough odds for former combat fighter pilots. And as you know, the odds were with us on that day, and we safely landed on the surface of the moon. To the talcum-like lunar dust, we all remember Neil's words. But the first words that came to my mind was magnificent desolation, the magnificent achievement of humankind, of man to set foot on another world for the first time was certainly a magnificent achievement for humanity. And yet there was the desolation of the lunar landscape around us, no sign of life, no atmosphere, total blackness beyond the horizon for 14 days of darkness, 14 days of daylight. Not a good place to set up housekeeping. Now, this next is the photograph that Neil took of me, called the visor picture. And it's called that because if you look in the visor of my helmet, you can see the reflection of the landing craft and the white-suited guy. That's Neil, and that's my shadow going toward him. Now, people have asked me, because this was very much on the spur of the moment. It wasn't planned in the least. They said, why is this picture turn out to be so iconic? Because Neil took the picture, but I got three words to describe that picture. Location, location. Now, my job as the junior guy was to set up experiments and such. So Neil had the camera most of the time. And we hadn't planned everything, so most of the pictures were his taking pictures of me, except for a few times when I got the camera and took this picture of my boot print. Now, my son said to me, he said, you know, Dad, it's kind of iconic, because I've taken thousands of pictures as a photography enthusiast. But you only took a couple of photos in your life, and it turned out to be one of the most iconic in history. It just ain't fair. Once you got it, you might as well stay on top. When we got back into the lunar module, tracking dust in, we had to take off the heavy backpacks. But we had to repressurize the cabin first. And with the backpacks off and other unnecessary gear, we were hooked up to the spacecraft system. So we opened the hatch again and threw out the garbage bags and the Hasselblad camera and a lot of other junk. It's still up there. But we're getting ready to sleep. So I said, hey Neil, I got dibs on the floor. There wasn't any place to sleep, and that was the only flat place. So I laid down, and it was getting cold in there, so we had the helmets, turned the heat up full, but it was still pretty cold. And I noticed that we had tracked in some dust, lunar dust, but alongside that was a little black thing that didn't belong there. And I know it didn't come from the lunar surface. And here's a picture of that little black thing. It's a circuit breaker, broken off. So, I wonder what circuit breaker that is on my side of the spacecraft. It was pretty cramped and, moving around. We were bumping into everything, and probably my backpack. So I went and looked along the row of circuit breakers, some in, some out, as a procedure. And this one, that was broken off, was the engine arm circuit breaker. Now, some circuit breakers you leave pulled out a good bit of the mission, like the one that says, jettison parachutes. Now, you don't want to jettison parachutes at the wrong time, so you leave the circuit breaker out. Now, engine arm, we leave out until we get ready to land, and we push it in, and the descent engine gets turned on by the computer. And then after we land, we pull out the circuit breaker, because we don't want unusual things to happen when we're sleeping or something else, when we're out on the surface. But we ain't gonna leave without that engine working. So we called mission control, and we missed a great line. We could have said, Houston, we got a problem. It turns out they had the problem. So while they said, oh, why don't you guys go to sleep? We'll look over all the circuits and see if we can come up. Go to sleep. Now, can you imagine two guys up there on the moon and they don't know whether they can light the engine to come back home? And the guys back on Earth say, go to sleep. So we woke up the next morning and checked in, and they said, we can't figure out a way to get around that and get power. So it looks like you're going to have to try and push in where that's broken off. But I'll tell you what, instead of right before launch, normal time, we'll do it about 2 hours early. So we started thinking a little bit, and my little finger was about the right size, but there's electricity. Maybe a ballpoint pen. That's metal too. But we had a felt tip pen that wrote a little more legibly for putting down some of the numbers. So we decided to use the felt tip pen. And about 2 hours before, Houston tells us, okay, we got power to the circuit. Voila. I did understand. I took a little French, just for some people in the audience. After years of careful planning and training, something as small as little circuit breaker. You know, things can go wrong. And we needed that. And we did need that. And so when it got the right time, you may have heard the guy in Houston said, Tranquility Base, you're cleared for liftoff. So what did I say? I thought about it for a while. I said, Roger, Houston, we're number 1 on the runway. Now, if you can keep the words moving so they're up with me. Okay, now, back on Earth, when we went to parades and around the world, everyone sort of felt, we saw signs that said, we did it. The world welcomed us back as heroes. But we knew that we were not, I mean, that they were cheering, but not just for 3 guys, but for what we represented, that a nation and the world coming together, we'd accomplished the impossible. The true value of Apollo is the amazing story of innovation and teamwork that overcame many of the obstacles to reach the moon. And I feel very privileged to have played a part in that historic event. And it took a team of 400,000 or more people working together toward this shared goal. Engineers, rocket scientists, program managers, technicians, even the seamstress that sewed up our spacesuits. It was a unified effort. Obviously, my story didn't stop there. When I came back, I wrote an autobiography called Return to Earth, not Journey to the Moon. Return. That was the most difficult part for me, because I didn't really know what to do when I came back. I did decide I wanted to return back to the service. But because of all these uncertainties, and after a year commanding a test pilot school instead of the Air Force Academy, I retired. My family and marriage struggled, and I was suffering from depression and alcoholism. I figured I needed some help to keep myself moving. So I consulted people to quit drinking, and I have 37 years now. I get thirsty from time to time. So I focused on my passion, which was thinking ahead about space. And I began putting all my energies into doing that, mostly thinking about how we could do things better. And things turned around and got much, much better. And I'm very grateful for all the help that I received. Don't you ever be afraid to ask for help. I'm sure glad that I did. So at my age of 86, my life is better than ever, and I feel more like things coming together, and even the last few days have added to the potential for what my plans might be. And I consider myself a global statesman for space. And I'm been doing as much as I can to move things forward. People ask me, why do we need to go to Mars? Why do we even need a space program? By venturing into space, we improve life for everyone here on Earth. The scientific advancements and innovation that come from space-based research create products and technology that we use in our daily lives. Cell phones, TV, GPS, navigating, advances, medicine, all of these wouldn't have been as advanced without investments in the space program. Now, this is a picture of Stephen. And I visited with him twice in Cambridge now, and gave him a shirt. And he said recently, we have made remarkable progress as a human species in the last 100 years. But if we want to continue, our future is in space. I couldn't agree anymore. I won't be around to see much of it happen, but I want to do everything I can to lay the groundwork. And this is why I wrote my plan for the future in my book, Mission to Mars, released National Geographic in 2013. And I have a new kids book, Welcome to Mars, published also by National Geographic Kids. And this book, and I hope, will inspire many of the kids today. And this is very important because they are the ones who will be carrying out the detailed planning to make all of this happen and to be at Mars. And I've been planning this transportation system called Cycling Pathways to occupy Mars with the help of Purdue University and the Buzz Aldrin Space Institute, now at Florida Tech in Florida, where I live. And I've been getting a lot of help from various people, all with the goal of a permanent settlement on Mars. You ain't seen nothing yet. Needed all the help I could get. So, in March of this year, I visited Stonehenge and sent a message up to the cosmos. But I still have a very adventuresome life now. I've been to the North Pole, few downs in a Russian nuclear icebreaker. I've been down 3,800 meters, about 2 miles, to the ocean floor to see the Titanic. And my favorite thing is to scuba dive in many places around the world whenever the schedule allows. And here is one of my favorite pictures. On the trip to the Galapagos Islands, my son gave me an 80th birthday present of a trip on a diving boat. And he took this photo of me intercepting and hitching a ride on a whale shark. That you do this immediately. Now, to maybe make it to the South Pole. Maybe, if I can schedule it. But you never really know where I'm going to be. I have a lady partner, and she flew around the world, and I joined her for the last half of that. So if you want to keep up with my activities, you can check in the real buzz, and we'll be putting updates on www.buzzaldrin.com, and my Share Space Foundation is dedicated to improving education of youngsters. But I'll be everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+. Humanity needs to push forward. Just like we did. In 1969, Apollo was a story of people at their very best. We started with a dream, and we did the impossible. I know, because I'm living proof that the impossible was achieved, and it can be done again. Let's go for it.